to Malika Elias. There I'm going to miss it. I'm in a scattered place. I'm trying to center here. And me, grandmother Rabia Noor. We're going to talk about the native prophecies today in the fact that it was predicted or seen actually many, many years ago that during this time, the women would come forward and the women would take their rightful places and lead. And also that truth could no longer be buried. And we see that this is manifesting everywhere in all walks of life. Women are coming forward and leading countries, leading breastfeeding while they're doing it, that they are coming forward to lead revolt, that they are taking their country and their people in their hands and saying, okay, we can't sit back anymore and let these things go out of control. And they're taking back their own destinies and their children's. So truth also at this point cannot be buried. And we see that also all things are being excavated. You cannot lie about anything. And that is even on a personal level, all the way through governments, through all the hidden histories and atrocities and things that have been buried, people finding relatives that they, children that were adopted out, just on every single level, truth is being birthed. And so in that vein, truth is being birthed for women as well, because we've been sold a bill of goods and we have looked at ourselves or gotten ourselves in a position where we believe that we are less than the divine creation that we are. So in that vein, I'm going to do a prayer and open up to spirit, because this is the time that women are reclaiming their sovereignty, that the divine feminine energy is very present on the planet, has been, but she is awakened in so many ways, and her sisters in all of their incarnations are waking up women. So at this point, we are in a space where we have to relearn who we are. We have to relearn our whole thing about the bill of goods we've been sent and we've swallowed about who we are and where we are in this creative place. So Divine Heavenly Mother, we give thanks for this day. We give thanks for this panel. We give thanks to all of the women and the men and all the people that are willing to listen, that are coming forward to hear that the truth that is being told. We are excavating ourselves as the divine sovereign beings that we were always created to be. We are going back to who we are and reclaiming ourselves so we can have healthy societies. We are so grateful for the frequency and tone that you have emitted, and your daughters are hearing and waking up and coming to you and saying, I'm ready. And they are leading, they are learning, they are thirsty. Thank you, Mother, for the safety and protection of those that are on the front lines, that are in harm's way, that are standing up against untruth and saying, not anymore, not anymore. And those precious beings, we ask you to keep them in divine light and protection. We ask that you reach back, as you always do, to all of your daughters and to your sons who are willing to listen. But in this vein, this is the time of the women. So don't be offended, men, because right now we're talking about the women and their roles and the reclamation of the divine feminine, because without that, we will stay in this same place that we've been for too long. And with that, Mother, we say thank you, Yako Ki, Amen, Amina, and we are so in gratitude. So I would like Grandmother Walks on Water, who is a medicine woman, and I would also be remiss to try to say all she is, so I'm going to let her speak for herself. Grandmother, you're on.
Yako Ki. Halito family, Halito daughters, sisters, granddaughters. I am grateful to Grandmother Rabia for asking me to come on, because I would like to discuss how we claim sovereignty over our bodies, how we honor and respect our bodies, how we release ourselves from toxic, artificial connections to the physical world, to the industrial world. In order for the earth to be saved, women will have to save themselves. We will have to have an old new connection with ourselves. It is important for us to understand that we must claim sovereignty over our vagina, over our womb, over our breast, over our person. Every 28 days, most women in the world release unused eggs. And this, in our tradition, in the Choctaw tradition and many native traditions, is called our moon time, because many women bleed either on the new moon or the full moon. When I came to Baltimore to live with my mother had already gone into menopause. And because I was still bleeding, my mother started bleeding again. When my granddaughters came here, they were new moon bleeders. And because they moved into my house, and I'm not even bleeding anymore, but I used to be a full moon bleeder. And my granddaughter started bleeding on the full moon with me. So it lets us understand that women are connected to the cosmos, to the ocean, to the earth, to the moon, to the sun. And that relationship should be looked at carefully and reassessed. Um, our blood is sacred. Our blood is sacred. Our blood is sacred. Our blood helps us to feed the earth. When I was raising my daughters, I did not stress my daughters with house cleaning and school and cooking when they were bleeding, because your blood is a sacred time for you to rest, for you to dream, for you to relax. In the world we live in now, women are behaving like men. We are running, we are wearing Tampax so we can keep swimming, we can keep going to work, we can keep running businesses. And so if women don't take responsibility for self-care, what could happen is that pregnancy could stop. The earth could be tired of us not connecting with our mother, the earth, with our sister, the wind. The earth could get exhausted from us pretending to be men. And so it is time right now. The prophecy has already stated that women shall lead, but in order for us to lead, we must prepare ourselves to be ready to lead. So let's talk about our blood. Sanitary napkins in the supermarket have formaldehyde and bleach in them. Formaldehyde and bleach have no business being near our sacred garden. It's going to cause us damage. Women are suffering from fibroid tumors, endometriosis, womb cancer. So we want to be able to put the most glorious, beautiful, organic, and soft things near our vagina. So if you are buying sanitary napkins, it's important that you have a terry cloth, white cloth.
Mm-mm.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear now?
Yes. Turn your volume up.
I said you didn't hear it.
We heard the white terry cloth.
I don't hear you. You hear me now?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you hear me before?
Terry cloth.
Okay. It's important that you put a clean terry cloth between your sanitary napkin and your vagina to protect your vagina. It's important that you don't wear polyester and artificial fabric near your vagina. It's too precious. It's important that you put your hands in your blood. So with my daughters, when they first had their moon ceremony, I had a big ceremony for them. I invited people, mothers, food. They dressed up. They sweated for the first time, and they were given a moon bowl. The moon bowl is what you use to wash out your cloth. Because when my mother was a girl, there was no such thing as store-bought sanitary napkins. All they had was cotton cloth that they washed, hung on the line, and reused. And because we are living in a world that we feel like we need more convenience, we feel like we don't have time to take care of ourselves. Our vagina is crying. Endometriosis means you never stop bleeding. It's weeping. And with African women in the United States, we are we are more likely to have fibroid tumors. These are knots. This is stress. This is anger balled up inside your vagina. So what we want to do is to be able to train ourselves to flow easily, to flow carefree. We want to be able to be friendly with our vagina, with our womb. We want to touch our womb and sing to it. We want to wake up in the morning and touch our heart and our womb and hum to ourselves. Because if you lay in the bed, as soon as you wake up, if you start humming, the first place you're going to feel it is in your vagina. And then you touch your heart. So you want a heart vagina connection because we have brains we have a brain here, but we have one in our heart. We have one in our gut. We have one in our vagina. So you want to connect yourself to be able to telepathically be always in tune with your heart and with your vagina. And so how we treat our vagina matters. In intimate relationships with men, we have to understand how we want to be engaged with. In the Tao of sexology, it says that when a woman is involved in sacred sex, she can reach 9 levels of orgasm and see the future. Right? This is what we're here for. We're not here as a play toy. We are here as the sovereign of Mother Earth. We are sisters with her. We are her daughter. She's our mother. And so we want to be able to walk in the world in beauty. We want to be able to take ownership of ourselves. Because, for instance, me, I'll just say this, I'm divorced. And so if a man is interested in trying to date me, I will give him a copy of the Tao of Sexology. Because in that book, it shows you how to use intercourse to heal your internal organs. And so that is a book I would recommend. I gave Cultivating Female and Male Sexuality to all of my children when they turned 16 because I wanted my daughters to know how to protect themselves. I wanted my son to know how to be a protector. I wanted my children to walk in beauty in the earth and to use the intimacy between men and women to be able to heal the earth, to heal the two-legged family, and to make a future for those coming. So I think that's all for now.
Okay.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for speaking. Malika?
Hey everyone, my name is Malika Elias. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a campaigner for food and agriculture, sustainable food and ag system, and I am also a sustainable fashion model. So, kind of going along with the things that we've already heard, something that in my experience has been one of the most important things to consider when thinking about barriers to women's leadership or how we can come back to ourselves has to do with this intersection of health and women's wellness and everything that has just been mentioned. So something that I think people don't realize, probably I do because I have struggled with this myself, but things are not normal. So there's something very strange happening with women right now. We're literally, so many of us that have hormonal imbalances are quite literally turning into men. So we're gaining weight in our midsection. We're losing our hair. We are gaining hair in all the wrong places, in the beard area. And it is quite a sight. And, some people are okay with that and they're comfortable with themselves. Most people feel highly uncomfortable because it is such an unnatural phenomenon. And this is, this is all a result of so many things, but so much of it has to do with the fact that like we literally, we don't have a choice. Our governments and the corporations that they make deals with have polluted our environment, have polluted Mother Earth. So there are, BPA, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. There are PFAS, which are forever chemicals that you find in fire retardants and nonstick pans. You've just got all of this gunk everywhere that every single day is making its way into our system. No matter how clean you eat, a lot of the times organic stuff also is right next to a field with conventional vegetables that's sprayed. And so everything that's labeled organic, it has all this other crap on it anyway. Glyphosate is ruining our gut health, which is causing autoimmune disease and other types of hormone imbalances. So there's a lot that is making us extremely sick. And being sick leaves us in a very vulnerable place where we can't even think clearly. We can't think for ourselves. Therefore, we can't think for other people. We can't lead. We can't really do what we were called here to do. And it's a pretty miserable existence to just walk around having so much untapped power and being literally weighed down by all of these things that are around us. And add to that this, stress to the equation, and what Grandmother Walks on Water was mentioning earlier about all the ways in which we're moving in a very heavily masculine dominated way every day. Masculine and feminine energy exists for a reason. And there are times to employ one over the other. But unfortunately, so many of us are stuck in the masculine all day long, especially women of color, because there are many, many defenses that we have to put up every single day just to move through our life in a way that makes us feel safe and that allows us to generate income and just live. So there's a lot. And when you're stuck in that stressful environment, on top of being inundated by all of these chemicals that are in our environment, all the other stressors, maybe you have children, it leaves you kind of like a shell of a person. So one of the things that I really try to stress for people after I have come out of a very lengthy illness process with my hormonal imbalance and autoimmune disease is just how important it is to set boundaries for yourself, not just as Grandmother Walks on Water mentioned earlier about men, but also what you put in your body, what you put on your body. It's extremely, extremely, extremely important to pay very close attention to the type of food that you're eating and what you have access to. Like, are you eating processed food every single day? Are you unknowingly eating things that are inflammatory for you specifically? Are you engaging in a really, really stressful work life that probably feels good because you're making a decent amount of money, but then you go home and your body is failing you and you can't do all the things that you want to do? Those are really important questions to ask ourselves to really be able to bring to fruition a better life and a life that's going to allow you to lead and feel more empowered in your femininity. So something that I have had to do personally, and I'm just using myself as an example because, again, like I've been through this. And so some of the things that I have done and some of the resources that I've used have looked like looking at environmental working groups, the Beauty is Skin Deep database. And I think Aisa or myself or someone will circulate a folder with resources later. So some of the things that we mentioned, don't feel obligated to write them down because we'll circulate them. But there are databases like the environmental working groups and some other organizations as well that have done an extensive amount of work and really, really time consumptive work looking at different sorts of personal care products. Rabia earlier mentioned not using pads, for instance, that have chlorine and these other toxic chemicals that you put in that area that's really sensitive. So there are alternatives, like Seventh Generation has some really great cotton pads and personal care products. And there are just some really, really wonderful companies that are dedicated to sustainability and sustainability properly, because we all know that sometimes greenwashing occurs and people just throw around that label. But there are a lot of resources out there that you can take a look at to make sure that what you are using is going to allow you to be healthy and allow you to be more spiritually charged. Because when you have a clean body and you have a clean digestive system and you don't have a ton of diseases, it's a lot more easy to be spiritually charged and to be able to download from the universe, from God, whatever it is that you believe in, that is going to be able to guide you on your purpose and on your path.
Yes, and all of that is very important. Also, Honey Pot is another company that makes really good products for women. So self-care is a very big part, because when you take care of yourself, you're able to think better and you are able to function better. I want to go back and touch on spirit, because spirit is where we live. Spirit is the basis of everything. Women have gotten away from um, their connection to spirit, and that's what um, has gotten us in this predicament that we're in now. We have given away our, as I said, our sovereignty, because we have bought all of these different male scripted ways of looking at what divinity is. We have gotten all sorts of stories that demean and demonize women when it comes to spirituality, and things that just don't make sense. And people will say, well, it's tradition, but all tradition is not good. And all tradition, and a lot of the traditions are not made by women. And I am saying this because I see examples of women just saying, well, I do this because that's what's required of me. That's what women are supposed to do. And the first thing women need to do, in my opinion, and as I have been guided, because I flow with mother, as she directs me, that's what I do. When I get up in the morning very early, I immediately thank her for every single breath that I take, for everything that she has gifted me with and continues to gift me with, what I'm aware of and what I'm not aware of. And then I ask her, what would you like from me today? And I listen. And then I take the guidance that I'm given and I go and I do what she says. And so we are all being guided. I have women come to me I've been at retreats and conferences and had women walk up to me and say, I don't know why I've been guided to go and talk to you, but I just feel like I need to ask you a question. And I'm like, okay, I don't know either, but go ahead. Well, one lady, she said, I have to tell you a story. She said, I was sitting at my piano one day and I got this, I can only think that it came from Divine Heavenly Mother, that I needed to give myself over to her, to start listening and honoring the things that she's been teaching me. She said, so I listened to that guidance and I sold my house. I quit my job. I moved to a whole nother state that I'd never been to before, and just trusted that she was guiding me to where I needed to be. I got off the plane, I got in a cab, I went into the town. She said, and I went into a cafe and I was just sitting there, and the woman that owned it came over to me and we started talking, and I told her my story and she started laughing and she said, well, welcome, because number one, I have a friend who's selling her house that sounds like it's just perfect for you. I know somebody else that is in your field that is looking for someone that will hire you immediately. And she said, and so welcome, because you listened, you came right into, and everything is set for you just to walk in. And she looked at me and I started laughing and I said, yes, exactly. And she said, but that's not what I really wanted to ask you. She said, are there really fairies? And I started laughing and I said, you mean the ones that are looking at you right now in the bushes that are laughing at you, listening to your story? And I said, this is the thing that, we know all these things to be true. Stories of fairies and mermaids and all these other beings that are feminine in most of their nature, that are helpers to the earth and to that are cosmic children that talk to mostly women. We have been taught to deny these things, and they're pushing back. And so we need to find that sacred place, that sacred, breathable space, walking on the earth. I have friends that garden and they always wear their gloves and they got these shoes on. And I said, why do you separate yourself from the earth? How can she talk to you if you won't put your hands in her? Put your feet on the earth. You need to be healed, lay on her and ask her for help. These are parts of us that we have gone missing from. Women worked in fields and they sang to the plants, and the plants were healthy and the plants gave back. Women have stopped doing so many things that were natural to us. And then we wonder why the food is, it's denatured. We know because chemicalized seeds have been put in our thing, but there is a way to take that back. You can take your seeds and put them in your mouth and hold them in your mouth and sing to them and pray with them and ask them for what you want. If you need medicine, ask them to become that medicine plant, and you support them, they'll support you. And when you grow them, keep nurturing them, keep talking to them, keep praying with them. All of these things, when you pray to the water, which we're mostly made of, and you give that water back the love and the concern and the recharging and gratitude and the love, that water also enhances the water within you. But everywhere that water goes, those prayers go, and things become more balanced. And we've gotten away from doing these everyday things that are natural to us as breathing. And then we develop all of these diseases because we listen to some of the most absurd, horrific, detrimental things that we are taught that it's okay to do. Grandmother Walks on Water is talking about sanitary napkins. We talk about, strapping ourselves up in these bras with wires and things. And then women want to know why they have breast cancer, because all the toxins are being cinched into your body. This whole thing that people have gotten into with weight shaming and just so many things where they're detrimental to women's growth and to women's being, because women no longer hold themselves sovereign. We no longer hold ourselves with spirit. And so as we pull these parts of ourselves back in, everything else will flourish once we become our sacred selves again. And so because this is a women's time, and I understand that, yes, the prophecies say women shall lead and truth shall be, but women have to heal to be able to lead properly and wholesomely and lovingly and spiritually, because we can say all sorts of things. If we don't believe it ourselves, then we won't be able to manifest those things. And there are many women out there that are imbalanced, and they have more male energy than female energy, and they operate the same way that men do. And so look carefully at who you're saying okay to lead you. And so I'm going to be quiet and call on Grandmother Walks on Water. We have another elder, Sister Lynn Pritchard, who is Mi'kmaq, who is having the worst time trying to connect and is not able to get on yet. I'm hoping she will. She's in Canada. So we'll hold space for whatever the Grimblies that are keeping her out will move out the way and let her in. But Grandmother Walks on Water, what would you like to say? And then we also should probably look in the chat. As you know, I'm not a techie, so if there's something in the chat you see that you would like to respond to as well.
Okay. I'd like to say that every choice we make today builds our future for tomorrow. And, there's an old saying, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And, there's a series on Netflix about a time in the future where women were not able to have babies. But the women that were not able to have babies were the rich, wealthy women. So they were kidnapping regular women and forcing them to live in the house with them, have sex with their husbands so that they could procreate for them and then take the baby as their own. And so if you don't lose it, you'll lose. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. Having an abortion is a problem for your body. I understand if there is incest or rape, that's a severe situation. But from my daughters, I'm understanding that women are having drunk sex. They are just getting drunk so they're not responsible for who they're having sex with. Therefore, anything could happen to your womb. And you're not being accountable for guarding the sacredness that you are. So that's the problem. That's something that should be dealt with. It should be looked at. Bringing all kinds of things into sex, like choking, beating, you name it. I don't even know the extent to which this abuse is going to. That's a problem. Because if you do not honor and cherish that which is in you that makes life, you will lose it. And then one day you'll decide, oh, I think I want to have a family, and there'll be no family to be had. So I want younger women to consider the battery that your body is normally being put under. And the society we live in, they want you to think this is normal. It is abnormal. It's like slavery. So there are a few things that I wanted to discuss about how we love our body. It's very important. If you get pregnant, you must breastfeed. If you dry the milk up, it's going to turn into knots in your breast and cause you some later problems. Um, Dancing naked in the mirror is very important because it seems like the Anglo-Saxon man wants his woman to look like a 12-year-old boy. So she's always under a lot of stress to be skinny. And women have more fat cells than men because we're going to make milk. Our hips are going to spread. We're going to carry people in our body. We're just going to do all these luscious things. And so, if you're skinny when you're 15, that's because you're a child. Once you become a woman, you should never try to force your body to be 15 again. However, your body has evolved from your life experience, that should be your joy. When you take a shower, pop out the shower and dance naked. I mean, just shake it up left and right, up and down, and let yourself feel how beautiful you are in whatever state your life has put you in. Now, if you are overweight because you are making emotional decisions about food, you're not exercising, you're using food as a boyfriend, that's a problem. We want to clear that up. And so I would suggest for people to take a look at the blood type diet because we don't all have the same blood type. And so we don't all eat the same food. There's no one diet that's going to work for everybody. So, you take $10 and check your own blood type. Just go into Google and say blood type kit. And the author of the blood type diet, he sells the kits for $10. And you check your own blood type. My daughter was living in California. She got sick. She had cancer. And when she got healed from it, the first thing she did was came back home. And so as soon as my granddaughters got to my house, I had to check everybody's blood to know how to feed them. Because my middle granddaughter, she said to me, she has a digestive system like an old woman. She's 12. I said, you don't think that's a problem? So when I checked her blood type, she's not supposed to eat dairy. And her mother is a dairy queen. And so once we got that straightened out, she stopped having stomach aches. She could eat, she could figure out what she needed. Yeah, so just, there are so many things. Like I don't live in the time of my mother when they had to just pray and wait for inspiration. We also do, but we have so much information available to us. So, like for instance, we are here in Turtle Island. This is our land. The Anglo-Saxons took it from us and then brought their diet. Their diet is carbs and flesh and cheese. That's their diet. That's a European diet. If we are having African blood and native blood, we can't eat like that. We cannot. So think about that. Think about your blood type. Think about your ancestry. Think about your own DNA as to what you can eat and how you should live. I want to mention the importance of sleeping outside. Now, I know everybody can't sleep outside, but sometimes if you can, get together with a group of people and go camping, if you have a big enough backyard like I do, I sleep outside all summer. I don't run my air conditioning because I think it's contaminating the earth and I'm a little allergic to the freon. So I can't wait for it to get hot so I can go outside and sleep. Be outside barefooted as much as possible, like Grandmother Rabia was saying. Have your hands in the earth, have your feet in the earth. If it's possible for you, bleed into the earth. In the olden days, with Native people, we had a moon lodge. And when you were bleeding, you went to the moon lodge to do your bead work, to sit with your other sisters and bleed into the earth. And your husband would fix food and bring it to you, and he would sleep outside the moon lodge. And when you came out, he would say, while you were in this holy state, did you dream anything for us? Is there any information you have for us? So I would suggest for us to look back at our ancestors and how we lived. You know, most of us that live on the East Coast, the Native women, we were matrilineal. You know, so there was no such thing as you getting a divorce and then you in the street begging with a cup because you can't feed your children. Because in the matrilineal system, the land, the house, everything, it all goes to the mother because we are raising children. But in a Euro context, you know, their women didn't have any control over themselves or their or property or anything. But if you are, you know, from West African blood or Native blood, that's not our history. We were very empowered as women. Our word and our decisions and our wisdom was honored. And so we must look back at who we were before we were colonized and try and grab some of those things and bring it back. Um, Abortion is a vacuum cleaner being put into your vagina. It is sucking all the walls out of your sacred, most beautiful place. And so we want to make good decisions about sexual encounters with those that we are, you know, dating, in love, married to. We want to make good decisions for our body. And sometimes a woman will think this is the worst time to be pregnant. And then she may be 18. And then 20 years later, that very daughter that she had saves her life. That very daughter that she had has wisdom to help her on her journey. That very daughter that she has assists her in evolving in a way that she could not have had she not birthed that best friend of hers. So these are some things to look at.
Okay, so Malika, you got some comments on that? Or would you like to bring something else forward?
Sure. I mean, I think, again, everything that both of y'all have said is incredibly important. And I think something that we haven't mentioned yet, and speaking on the importance of treating your body as a temple and consuming things that are proper for your body, for your blood type. Yes, testing, like something that I'll send around, and resources as well, are the various different kinds of tests that you can get. Unfortunately, are not covered by insurance because our healthcare system does not want us to be proactive. It is lucrative for them for us to be ill, but we cannot afford to be ill, especially in this time period when we need to be able to lead. So some of the tests that folks should be looking at: blood type, absolutely. Checking for something called intestinal permeability, which looks at your gut health and whether or not you have a bunch of holes in your intestinal wall because of glyphosate, which is sprayed on all of our food, and the various different chemicals and pesticides that we're consuming on a daily basis. Other things, looking for autoimmunity, just looking for different ways that your body might be in a state of disease, and understanding how you work with Mother Nature, with the medicine that she has to offer, with the natural elements, to be able to put those things into remission and reverse most of the time. Hopefully, sometimes there are things that are out of our control, but for the most part, we can do a lot with what we have available to us. And also, another thing that I wanted to mention, being on your period is such a sacred thing, and something that really concerns me, that I have been fed since I was 16 years old, is the importance of going on birth control. And I have friends who have said things like, wow, I'm so happy I only bleed 4 times a year. As someone who has struggled with polycystic ovary syndrome, not seeing your period for a long period of time is incredibly distressing. It is always a sign of good health when you see your period. For the most part, when it comes regularly, that is a good thing. And I'm so tired of the narrative and the rhetoric that is used around demonizing bleeding. We're supposed to bleed. There's absolutely no reason why you should be taking something that only makes you bleed 4 times a year. And on the topic of bleeding, it's also incredibly important to be able to eat and consume things that are going to support you while you're bleeding. There's this app called MyFlow, and that's also going to be included in the resources. And there are various other types of apps and protocols and programs that you can look at to be able to devise a plan so that, okay, you can see like when I'm ovulating, I'm supposed to be eating this and this. When I'm on day X of my period, this is what I should be eating. And that's really a natural way of living that we've just lost over time, that has really been robbed from us because of the type of food system that we've been consumed by. So it's extremely important to get back to that way of eating, that way of living, eating with the seasons, because your body knows what to do when it gets the right nutrients at the right time. So I think that's what I will add. I wonder if we have any questions from folks. I don't see any in the chat, but if folks want to start posting things in the chat, now's probably a good time.
Yes. So I would like to in tying all these things together in some ways, you know, it's very important that with women's health, we talked about, yes, our diets and eating better and having clean water. It is very imperative that we not just eat healthy, but that we pray over our food. We pray over our water. We raise the vibration. We give it gratitude. We always thank for everything that we get. I'm a forager by nature. I love going out and just walking. I've been blessed to stay at the Patuxent River, at the River Keepers headquarters. And so I go out in the morning after I pray on the dock and spend time with the river and thanking Mother for all the blessings. And then I listen and I just go off walking down the road and I just say, okay, what do you got for me today, Mother? One day it was because I didn't feel well and I needed some mullein. And so I went out looking around and I couldn't find any. So I came back and I was like, So I started texting a bunch of friends and said, can somebody send me some mullein, please? I need mullein. And Mother said, you didn't look in the right place. Go back out. So I got back out, went back walking up the road and found 6 mullein plants and picked some and harvested, brought it home and used the medicine. And my journey of listening and being available for her to talk to me and to show me things became my everyday joy. I would just walk down the road. I'm sure the people that drove past me and all thought I was insane, but I just walked down the road just singing my little heart out and looking around and just so thrilled at every single thing that I saw, touching plants and rocks and stopping and just giving praise for the abundance and the wealth of things that are out there for us, and breathing in that air and giving that praise back is so important in our grounding and becoming who we are meant to be. If we don't do those things, if those aren't part of our everyday equation, then we are really short selling ourselves on who we are and who we can become. I had developed this, and I still do it, as I go out and dance. I'll go places and wake everybody up with my drum and stuff early in the morning, just singing and dancing and talking to Mother and just, you know, sending praise. And when you dance on the earth and every dance, every footfall is a prayer. She teaches us so many things. And we have guides and angels that are with us, and we have ancestors, and they're all trying to help us to evolve and to become higher. This is not it. This is not just this lifetime. This is this dimensional field. Universes have been created, and we're part of microcosm in all of these universes of things that are out there. We have to stop self-limiting with all of these rules that have been enforced upon us that give us guilt and give us shame and tell us that we're there to be used by males or other people. And then they come up with these insane things like female genital mutilation and foot binding in the ancient Chinese stories. And these things were created by males, but enforced by females. And the question is, why? This is something that we have come and fallen so far from where we used to be thought of as the goddess force, the creative force, because the black holes of the universe birth all the star systems. Our cave, our womb space is that dark space that nurtures and holds creation that we birth forth. These things, when you don't honor these things and you don't own these things as sacred, and you give your sovereignty and your power away, you have nothing else to do but fall. And we have fallen so far. And so what I would like to see is that we are reclaiming ourselves. And in order to reclaim yourself, get up early. Don't be laying around in the morning and talking about, I'm just going to sleep in for a little while longer. No, get yourself up before that sun rises and greet that sun. Get up before the sun rises and go and just breathe. If you live in an apartment, you can open the window and just open your arms and look up and say, thank you, Mother, for another day and another breath. Guide me. You will come back to yourself in practice of spirit, of being in that space of synchronicity with the divine energy, but also with Mother Earth, who is under duress and stressed. But make no mistake that she will take care of herself. Don't get so caught up in, I got to save the earth and I got to do all these things. Yes, you have to be in tune with her. You have to be respectful of her. But if you save yourself and raise your own vibration, that helps her, because you become one less stress that she has. Okay, so I'm going to be quiet so somebody else can I see Grandmother Lynn is here. Lynn, can you hear? You're on mute. Please unmute yourself. There she is. You're boing, boing, boing. Oh, it's lagging. She's in Canada. She's our
I don't see anybody, but I see you. And I've been listening.
Okay. Would you like to?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you now. Welcome. This is Grandmother Lynn
Hi,
of
everybody.
my traditions and lineage and Irish, and she is in Canada. Welcome, welcome. So happy to see you.
Thank you. I had a lot of technical difficulties.
Okay.
I've been listening to part of your what you've been talking about, and I completely relate to. I could have said those things myself, but I think you said them so much more eloquently. But I just want to start out by saying that I am speaking to everyone today, this moment, from the Mi'kmaq. That is the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And the Mi'kmaq have inhabited this region since time immemorial. And I'm saying that because before the last few years, no one was doing that, acknowledging the land that they are standing on. And now more and more people, non-native people, have started to adapt respectful practices here in Canada. I don't hear it in the United States very often. So respecting the land and the original keepers of that land, I think, is another way of adding to our awareness and connection with all that is. I loved what you were talking about going for walks and working with the plants and speaking to the plants. I do the same thing. I can't wait for the snow to melt so I can get out and put my hands in the earth and watch the progression of the different plants that come and go throughout the different parts of the seasons. And when we go out into nature, we have a part of ourselves that needs that. We absolutely require it. And we even have, that's part of our organ system called the spleen. People don't really know what it's for, but it's for absorbing the sunshine and spirit substance, so that spirit substance can be distributed throughout all of our cells in our body. It's really important to even be naked in the sun. I think Grandmother Walks on Water would agree with me on that one. To absorb sunlight, because there's so much both physical and spiritual medicine in that sunlight. Here in Canada, we don't get as much sun as people in the southern areas, and we really cherish it. There's so many things to speak of, and I just to tell a little bit about myself, because my orientation tends to be kind of academic, but I also have the medicine part of me. I work with teenagers and children, exclusively First Nations, which is what we call our Indigenous peoples here. And many of them have been affected by intergenerational trauma. So a lot of my work is to try to find ways to have young people move forward and release the effects of that trauma. And it can be extremely debilitating. And the reason that they're in this situation is that the many generations of impact of colonization that deliberately tried to took away culture and language and tradition and what held people together. And, it all relates to the role of the woman in our early societies. So the woman is, I'm sure I missed a lot of your conversation, so I'm probably going to repeat some things, but the women's role has always been the framework and the backbone of keeping society going, literally bringing the life force through, so that so that we survive. Women are the reason for our survival. When you have contamination of the natural flow of many early centuries of figuring out what mattered and what works for a human race, and then material values come in and kind of contaminate all that and put things out of balance. What we find is that the women are put in positions where they're oppressed. Their natural role is interfered with. Their role of nurturing, offering guidance, protection as a caregiver, a voice of reason in community discussions, guidance to each other and to younger people, becoming respected leaders in their communities. A lot of that was damaged during the years, especially here where I am, where contact with Europeans was so long ago. It's almost 5 centuries here. That role was impacted. And a lot of the children I work with don't have mothers. They're all many of them are in foster care. And in Canada, it's all the result of years of institutional atrocities that maybe some of them were well intended, but we have a huge impact from the legacy of residential schools. Well, children were taken away, people in my age group were taken away from their parents. Some of my friends here who live in the reservation band communities would tell me about times where they had to run into the forest, and they dug big holes in the ground, and they would jump in the holes. Their mother would say, run, and they would jump in the holes and cover themselves with branches, hiding from the Indian agents who were here to take them away from their families. There's all kinds of things that happen because of that, abuses, sexual assault, things that happen to children. But one of the greatest impacts we're seeing right now is that children grew up not knowing what a family structure is. And they grew up with parents who did not know how to parent because they hadn't seen it. They had lost the structure of the family and the role modeling that our mothers have provided and our grandmothers have provided for so many eons. So we have people that have anxiety and loss, great losses that weren't even spoken of until recently. And then when they couldn't cope because of the loss of structure and knowledge and traditional wisdom, they were blamed for it. And then their children were taken away, something we call the 60 scoop, where children were deemed, the families were deemed not to be adequate, so they were taken away and put with non-native families for adoption, and many of those children were lost completely from their families. And I'm not saying these things to depress anybody, but it's kind of a study in what happens when we let go of our traditional female roles. And I'm not all about being stuck in the past, but as you said, we can take from the past things that worked well and adapt it to modern life as best that we can. But when we think about the woman's role, it's bringing through the life force. And not all of us are mothers. I've worked with children all my life, but I'm not a mother. But I feel like I've tried to make up for that with the thousands of children that I've worked with. And I've learned that we are so connected to the earth. So as you know, Rabia, I worked for many, many years, decades, with a Mi'kmaq medicine man. They traveled. I helped with sweat lodges and sweat lodge ceremonies. We didn't discriminate against people who could come. Everyone was welcome. Did a lot of traveling with talking circles and building and help build and help in the ceremonies in the sweat lodge and sang the sacred songs. And the teaching there is that the sweat lodge is the womb of the mother. Our early ceremonies, and in many, many societies, not just Mi'kmaq, were about making sure people recognize the sacredness of the womb and the woman's life-giving force. And that sweat lodge is something we build. It's made in a certain way where the young saplings that we use in our particular area are placed just like the ribs and the backbone of the mother. And it's dark, and we go in this, make it a sacred space. There's water and grandfathers, which are the rocks, and we make basically steam bath if people aren't familiar with it. And we suffer a little bit. We suffer a little bit, and we pray and we sing sacred songs. And when we come out, we crawl out on our hands and knees and we give thanks for the life we were giving, and we're sort of reborn. That whole sweat lodge ceremony is about being in the mother's womb. We also use the drum, and the drum is considered to be a sacred spirit, a being, and that being is the heartbeat of our mother. So when we're an infant, when we're a baby in our mother's womb, what is the sound we hear? We hear the steady beat of our mother's heart. It's consistently pumping life into us and giving us our growth and our strength and our ability to live. And so the drum was created to be a reminder of that connection with our mother, our own mother, the Mother Earth, the Mother of God, and how we honor that as one of the highest, most revered life force giving essence on earth. Grandmother Watson Water already mentioned the Moon Lodge, so I won't go into that, but what she said is very similar to what we were taught. And we think of it as something that happened a long time ago, but there's no reason why we cannot apply some of these principles in modern life. where we take time to rest and meditate during the menstrual cycles, which is considered, from all my knowledge, is a cleansing, just like the earth cleanses itself with the tides. And when there's high tide, the earth is washed clean. This is part of our cycle. Our connection with the Mother Earth is the high tides and this cleansing part of us that is a very powerful time. We have a lot of spiritual power during that time. So it was meant that the women should set aside their daily activities and tasks and meditate during that time and allow this cleansing to take place, and to teach the younger women and girls about what we had learned through our life experience and our meditations. And the men would, like as was said, would wait on the women and do the cooking and wait for the visions and dreams that came forward. So there's so much to be said about how we honor the very essence of the mother. In Mi'kmaq culture, we talk a lot about grandmothers. And the grandmother is the mother of all mothers. We have I have a picture on the wall back there, but I think the light's shining on it, you can't see it, but it's Nogami. And Nogami is the mother of all, going way back in time, and she's the one that carries the medicines. She carries the wisdom and the knowledge, and that is what keeps the people alive for centuries and centuries and centuries, or these teachings are handed down through the women. And when we talk about prophecy, it's just clear in everyone's face that we cannot survive without the women's original ability to nurture, strengthen, inspire, bring spiritual energy into their children and into the communities, and wisdom and guidance. Women are the ones that keep people safe. And men have their role too, but that's not the topic of discussion right now, I think. When and on that point, when we finish our prayers and when we make an important speech, Mi'kmaq people always say, "Sinogama." That means all my relations, and other First Nations people too use this idea that we are all related to everything. I'm related to you, Ravia. I'm related to the rocks. I'm related to the plants. I'm related to the moon and the stars, the earth, and to every living being on this earth. Because originally we all come to from the same source. And we acknowledge that every time we say a prayer, every time we speak of something that's coming from our heart. So all my relations means that we have to be inclusive and try very hard to bring everyone into the circle. We have talking circles. And the reason we use the circles so no one's left out. And the talking circles are a chance for people to heal. It seems like maybe we're just sitting around in a big circle and people are saying things, but there's a healing process going on because it's a ceremony where the spirit is called in to heal each person, to move them to be inspired to say what needs to be said at that time, because someone else in that room might need to hear what knowledge or experience that you've had. And sometimes I've sat in talking circles where I think I'm going to say something, I plan it and everything, and then all this whole other thing comes out because the spirit is moving people to bring forward information. And I might not know why I said that, but then someone will come up to you afterwards and say, "Oh my goodness, I was going through this thing and what you said was exactly what I needed to hear because that's the missing piece I was looking for." And that's the purpose of the talking circle, so that people can have a chance to open themselves up and relax and bring spirit through them, and also to share the trials and tribulations of being human. And people who feel shame and embarrassment about their problems suddenly realize, oh my goodness, that person's had the same kind of problem, and this person's had the same kind of problem. I'm not alone. And also, this is just part of what it means to be human, not to be shamed and blamed for my trouble. So I think that when we talk about what's the solution for bringing people back together, these types of things are on a grassroots level where we set up time and space for people to share with each other heart to heart and to have guidelines and rules about it so that there's no judgment and there's no carrying of information, personal information outside of that circle, where people can be encouraged to work on themselves and to also listen to elders who have experience and spiritual teachings. So I wanted to just mention too, because Rabia brought it up, that I am Mi'kmaq on my mother's side. On my father's side, I'm descended from Irish and Welsh. I like to think bards and poets. And their predecessors were an indigenous people called the Tula Dadan, and they were said to have highly evolved mystical abilities. They were invaded and disappeared into the trees. They became the trees and the animals. And so in Ireland, we hear many stories about spirits in the trees and animals and humans people that are half animal, half human. And they had a lot of wisdom and love for each other. So they allowed themselves to be sacrificed because they didn't want to fight what turned out to be the Celts. I've heard a lot of stories. I have spent time in the Arctic, in the Hudson Bay region with the Cree people. I've been in the canoe where they point out and say to me, look over there, we don't go over there because that's where the fish people live. They're half human, they're half fish. These are beliefs that are very living beliefs. They're not myths to these people that live in the northern areas. There's many stories I could tell about that, and it's living truth. It's not something they make up as a metaphor. And they say, yeah, so-and-so's son fell in love with one of the fish women, and he's over there now. Every now and then he'll put his shirt out so we know he's okay. And people believed, I went in Cree country, they would say, oh, so-and-so heard what we were doing, and he was 50 miles away. And I said, oh, you must be part wolf. And they were like, how did you know? And so there's lots of things, like Rabia was saying, that we don't, in our normal society, limits us to the way we see the world. There is so much happening that's fluid and miraculous, and we just have to be open to seeing it. Being out in nature, we see many things. There's many times I've sat with tobacco in my hand, praying with my eyes shut, and I open my eyes and there's an animal standing right in front of me because the energy of the spirit and the tobacco has drawn them to me. And back to Ireland, when I went to Ireland, it was so interesting to see these big earth mounds that have been there for thousands of years, all of them related to the stars and the position of the stars, but especially to the honoring of the earth mother and the mother spirit. Some people use the word goddess. I'm not sure they actually use that word, but we can think of it that way. There are mounds everywhere in Ireland where you go into an earth mound. There's stones that catch the sunlight. A lot of times they're set up to catch the solstice beams of light from the solstice sunrises. But as I learned with lots of investigations, not from archaeologists, but from elder people in Ireland, that those mounds were used as sweat lodges. And I heard stories about half fish people, half seal woman. There's all kinds of stories, and little people are stories we have here in Mi'kmaq country. We call them the Bulag Damuch. And over there, they have a different word for them. The people that live in the She, the hill. And it's just amazing to me how many similarities there are when you start really looking back in time to the beliefs and understanding it. Life was not how we see it now. And we can borrow on some of those things, In Ireland, they had sacred caves, not just earth mounds that they built, but sacred caves where they would have sexual ceremonies to ensure that there was fertility that would carry on their people from generation to generation. I remember when I was younger thinking, oh my gosh, like public sex, or, like how gross is that? But now I realize that sex is a sacred thing. And grandmother was touching on this. It's not supposed to be something that we use for recreation. It's a sacred gift from Creator to bring life into the earth so that we can survive. So they knew that, and they had very sacred ceremonies inside the earth to, and I don't know the details, but people would, it sometimes involve sexual sharing in order to create the children so that they would be coming into the world with wisdom and a sacred essence to them. So when you look at that, the role of the woman is what nurtures everyone, keeps them safe, feeds them, teaches them, guides them, brings the wisdom in. And because of that, women were and can be and will be leaders in the communities, because their whole our nature is to keep people safe. And of course, we can't paint everyone with the same brush, and we welcome variety and diversity into our world. I believe in inclusivity, but where we can, I think we need to look toward bringing women back into leadership roles, because if we look at what's happening right now, testosterone isn't serving us. Our babies are getting killed. And that's been happening for centuries. But I firmly believe from my spiritual learning that we're coming into a new age that is much more, hi Eleanor, much more enlightened. And as Rabia says, it's so important to work on being in the light and raising our vibration now more than ever, and teaching our children the same thing. So bonding with children is one of the things I wanted to bring up. What we see in my work as a mental health counselor and some of the trainings I go to, the child psychiatrists are saying our mothers are not bonding with their children anymore at infancy, at birth. They're the expression, sharing facial expressions is the first thing the child learns, and that's their communication and trust with their mother. And that bonding, holding them and skin to skin and that kind of thing, and breastfeeding is also very important for developing a healthy human being. So where are our mothers? Kids over here. Oops. And we're on our screens, and it's so natural, and people are addicted, but this is becoming a big problem because the early bonding that used to naturally happen with laughing and joking and smiling with our babies, holding them, making faces with them, making eye contact. That is communication and trust building. And we're tending to get away from that, according to some of the things. I see it in my own children that I work with, and it creates a huge sense of anxiety. Another thing is that we have to be parents to our children. One of the most disturbed, and I work with children with emotional difficulties. And I always said, it's really heartbreaking to see the children who have been abused. They have all kinds of coping behaviors that don't work very well, but they can learn those. And unless there's been a severe trauma, which is a whole other subject, they can come around from that abuse once they find someone they can trust, where there's nurturing and love and real trust and safety. The children that we've had the most difficulty bringing around and who have the most disturbing behaviors are those that their parents are not there with them. They're in the household with them, but they're not paying attention. The parents that indulge in their children, they might be doing a lot of stuff for their kids that they wanted for themselves and never felt like they had enough of. And they overindulge in their children. Their time spent with their children is partying, like being their best buddy, a peer, those kids have some of the most disturbing behaviors in my experience in my work, and I've been working in this 44 years. They don't feel safe. When we give clear boundaries and when we give communicated expectations and we stick to those expectations and we have, talks with our children, there are teachings for when they don't follow a certain expectation. And I don't believe in punishment, like the kind of punishment where there's modeling violence. There's no research to support that. However, there are many ways we can discipline our children, and that is their safety net. And I've seen it so many years. If we don't give that to them, they don't feel safe. And even our teenagers that are rebelling right and left and pushing against your expectations and your limits that you're setting with them, they're pushing against it because they want to know it's still there, so that they can feel safe to experiment with who they are and moving away from their identity with their parents. So I'm just throwing this out there because it affects our women and affects our girls. And there's just so many things to talk about, the sexualization of our girls and the media constant bombardment of messages about how we're not valuable unless we're sexy. It's called, you can see what the consequences of that is. Teaching our girls to respect their bodies, and I see the note, is one of the things that I really encourage people to do. And I just want to thank you for listening to that, because I have a lot more to say. There's a lot of things about spirituality that we could have in another discussion. And if anyone wants any references for healthy bonding with your children, dealing with sexual assault, the effects of trauma, sexual assault. In Canada here, we have the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Children efforts to heal that. There's some good references that I include in the resources. If you look under the educational packet there of ideas you could adapt to other communities when there's problems that are arising. I hope I was on the right topic for you, and thanks for listening.
Thank you for your wisdom, Lynn. And yes, everything you said was very valuable. And so we know a lot of the things that are wrong, and we've talked about some of the ways to correct some of those things. And thank you for the resources as well. One of the questions there was, how do younger people engage elders to be able to, how did Dima say that? Okay, she said, a lot of intergenerational conflicts continue to surface. How do we navigate these challenges while being respectful to our elders and our traditions, especially for those who are resisting change? Respectful is the key for me. The key thing is everybody does not know everything. We all have perceptions of how we think about things due to the way that we experience things. But if we come and sit with each other respectfully and with the idea and the openness that I can tell you how I see things, what I've learned, and we can take whatever is valuable in those things. If you're willing to listen to me with respect, I'm willing to listen to you with respect. But and that the younger people, they're very fiery, and I love them because they're very proactive in a lot of things. But a lot of the things that they're doing, they're repeating the same things we did in the 60s, but just by another name. And so we know the things that we experienced and what things were workable and that were things that were, what should I say? Things that did not work and were in some cases detrimental. things that were ideas that spiritually that were really earth-based, and the idea of being a loving being on the earth, but then other things that were encouraging and still do the really abuse of each other, not just women, but men as well, because when men abuse women, they abuse themselves as well. But we have to come out of the baser parts of our nature and come higher. And I think if any youngster that comes to me and young person, and they're all fiery and they got all these ideas, and I'll listen to what they have to say. I don't always agree with them, and I'll say so. And then I will tell them what I think, and they may agree with some of it or not all of it. But as long as we can respectfully sit with each other and have a dialogue, or I will lead by example. And not everybody's going to agree. You're never going to come to a place. But I think as long as we can come to the agreement that whatever we are doing, whatever we are teaching, whatever we are trying to bring forward with each other, if it's not harming anyone, if it's respectful and loving and a higher vibration, then though there's room to grow together and to be able to have these dialogues. And we also have to admit that all things that are traditional that we have been taught were not good things, and we cannot continue to enforce things that are detrimental to ourselves and to our children and to the earth, and say, well, that's the tradition, that's what the ancestors did. But okay, they did it and it didn't work, and we see that some of those things are not productive, and they're not healing, and they're not wholesome, and they're not but then there are so many more things that are. And I'm not against science, and I'm not against technology, but I think when sometimes science, when it is not done in a link with spiritual, because science cannot explain everything. Science can explain some things, and science is awesome, but there are higher layers to that come from spirit that supersede science. And technology is a wonderful thing as well, but there are downsides to technology that we have to admit that, some of these waves and things that I don't even understand that are, inundating our body, putting iPads in children's hands instead of having them out in nature, playing in the dirt and touching trees. And, I had one little boy at a conference that I was at, and I was talking about mermaids, and he said, there's no such thing as mermaids. And I said, how do you know there aren't? He said, because it's not true. There's no such thing. There can't be anything like that. There can't be. I said, well, can there be fairies? He said, of course not. There can't be fairies. I said, well, what about, he said, and I just found out that dolphins are real because, somebody showed him a film or something, and he got to actually see dolphins. But up until that point, he didn't believe that dolphins existed either. And I said, well, what happened to the children's imagination where everything stems from? I said, the fact that you can't even believe or open your mind to think that there could be mermaids, or there could be fairies, or there little people, or whatever you want to call them, that there are other things that's just, it's dulling their senses. It's dulling their ability to be higher beings. And so I showed him a picture of a sprite that lives in the woods next to where I live. And I talk to these beings all the time, and to the mer people. And so he said, no, there's no such thing. And I said, okay, what if I can prove it to you? And he said, no, you can't. So I went and I got my phone out, which is awesome use of technology. And I pulled up the picture and showed him this little sprite that sits in the pond. And sometimes he comes to my door and taps on the door. And I'm like, go on back over there and leave me alone. I'm busy. But he saw it, and his father walked over and looked too. And he's like, I can't believe this. And I said, because you have been taught that everything has to be proven, that there is no imagination, no magic, we have lost that. And when you lose that, you lose the ability. The Dogon people knew about Sirius A, B, and C before we had all these giant telescopes and stuff. And they're like, yeah, well, we already knew that thousands of years ago, but they were able through spirit to reach higher and to expand their consciousness into realms and ways that there are sometimes no scientific proof for. So I'll be quiet and somebody else want to jump in on, first of all, how do you show respect and intergenerational dialogue? Grandmother walks on water.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. One of the things is that both the generations have to try and have mutual respect for each other. When I was trying to grow my mother, because my mother was born in 1922, and her mother died when she was 37 from a heart attack. And she was told by a country doctor in Mississippi not to eat pork. And my mother had told me that story when I was younger. And as I grew older, watching my mother's siblings, one by one, die and become ill from food that is not an ancestral food for Native people. And I decided to try and save my mother's life. And I used something that she believed in at the time, which was Christianity. So I think that we have to try and meet the elders where they are and then walk them slowly towards the future. And I said to her, Ma, I saw in the book of Deuteronomy, it says, thou shalt not eat flesh of the swine, nor touch the dead carcass. So if you keep eating pork, you're going to hell. And I'm not going to hell with you. And she said, what? Because you can be a Christian your whole life and never read the Bible, never read the Old Testament. You don't know what's in there. You just know what the Saxons have programmed you to believe. And what I did was, every time I came to her house, which was every other day, she said, oh, come eat. I said, Ma, I can't. I don't eat pork no more. I'm not going to hell. And I would leave. And I'll come back 2 days later, hey, Ma. And we sit down laughing and talking. And she said, well, you're not going to eat? I don't eat pork. I can't. And everything else in our relationship remained the same, except that one thing. That's the one thing I was focused on. Is it possible for me to get my mother to live longer than her mother and her siblings if she goes back to a tribal diet? And so I think that what we have to do is love each other into the future. Even if you're saying something that elders don't understand, still laugh and talk with them. Take them to the supermarket. Everything else can remain the same. But the point that you're trying to drive home, you drive it home by just saying, oh, I can't do that. Oh, I don't eat cheese because cheese is for Europeans, it's not for us. We never ate cheese before, Ma. And then you keep doing everything else the same. And so I would say with the younger ones, respect the journey the elders have carried. I would say to the elders, respect the new information that the younger ones are giving, because we're always going to keep learning as long as we keep breathing. And I watched my mother evolve, because at the time I told her not to eat pork anymore. She was 50 already. And my mother lived with no health challenges after that. She was taking heart medication before that. And by the time she died at 78 from a car accident, she had absolutely no health challenges. So whatever it is that the younger ones have come in contact with, go gently and love them through it. And elders, when things are being brought to you that you never imagined or you never heard, listen and discern and be willing to live better, be willing to evolve. It may be something that you've always done, but it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. So yeah, that's what I would say. Just, because I've learned a lot from my children, and I appreciate some of their points of view about many things. And of course, they've learned a lot from me because, I raised them and gave them everything I had to give them. But there's always new information. And that's one thing that, my mother, she evolved past not just eating pork, she left Christianity completely and came with me. She was willing to, go and listen to, speakers about, helping her live a better life, her health. She was willing to go to listen to Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra, philosophies that would expand your consciousness. Because even though she was a praying woman her whole life, we did an experiment one time. I brought to her, I said, Ma, somebody said if you don't judge anything for 11 days, that you'll push yourself further in your evolution for spiritual height. And so we did this together. The thing that we learned was most of the judgment that humans have is about their own self. So we couldn't look at television because you'll be seeing somebody on TV and they'll be having on something you don't like. Oh, look at that. Why she put that on? That's judgment. So you had about 15 seconds to say, oh, my bad. I didn't mean it like that. I'm just saying, that's not my choice. So after we did this for 11 days, we were coming from South Hill, which was 20 miles from us. And we were in the car just laughing and talking. And when we pulled up into the driveway, it felt like we had been in the car 5 minutes. It's like we jumped through a time portal. And we looked at each other like, whoa, what was that? And so the possibility of quantum physics is now available. No one talked about that when my mother was young, even when I was young. But my children know what it is. My children know what dimensional time travel is. And so I'm just going to say, everybody just be willing to evolve and always put love first. No matter what's going on, know that our love for each other is more important than our differences. Our love for each other means that we want the best for each other. We don't need to be right with each other. We just need to love each other. So, yeah, that's what I think about that.
Lynn,
That's
do you
the
have-
best message anyone could give. That's the best message. Our young people are very diverse. Some of them are really influenced by some of the negative stuff that's constantly being thrown at them, but some of them are incredibly sensitive and intuitive and see things that I never thought of when I was 12 or that age. And young people like to help. They like to get their hands dirty and work. One of the problems I have with schools is that they sit all day. They need to be out there making and creating, and so I'm familiar with some programs where they get young people into senior homes. I'm not really a big fan of senior living. I think we should be intergenerational work living together, but I don't know if I can die on that hill. But we can bring the young people into those places and start relationships. They love to help, and they could be paired with an elder and learn the stories of the elder and share. The elders get a lot from that and stimulation. So I think that's one program I heard of. One of the healing programs in Canada for addressing some of the recommendations with the missing and murdered women and girls, which I included in the references, is a program where they have grandmothers work with young people. They bring grandmothers into the schools. And in our public schools right now, they're hiring elders from the Native communities to come in and give their teachings and stories and crafts and that kind of thing to the young people, whether they're Native or non-Native. And that's brand new. They were completely separate groups for many years up here. And things are really starting to move. Things are starting to bring people together. And our young people are open to that. They're much more open-minded than some of us older people. And it's a good thing to see, like it gives you hope for the future. So just bringing people together and making space and time for them to listen to each other sounds like a cliche, but it really is kind of the basis of everything. And it develops that love that grandmother's speaking of.
And I think the other thing that's missing is that we used to be, I knew I grew up in a interracial neighborhood, and we had people of all races there. We had Native people, we had white people, we had, Asian, we had Mexican, and Japanese. And so, but you respected everybody's home that you went to. Any one of those mothers had the ability, if you were messing up, she could spank you, punish you, put you in the corner, whatever it was. But they all fed you, they all nurtured you, they all looked after you. You learned what their traditions and customs were when the grandparents were in the house living there. You knew how to, if you might not have spoken the language, but you knew how to greet each one of them in their own language. And you knew what their cultural norms were. And you went into a Japanese house, you went in and you bowed and you spoke to those grandparents first, and same thing with with all the elders. And in those times, there was a safety because everybody's children was everybody else's children. All the children were nurtured by all of the mothers, and everybody was, so there was that sense of security and community and a huge, huge family. And we've lost that to some degree, and we have to get that back, where that is part of it too, is that we love all the children, and that we teach our children to be respectful of and helping and loving to all of the other children, and respectful to all of the adults. And and when you show that respect, which is love, then you build and nurture better and stronger communities. But that is one of the things that I don't see as much. And I see a lot of young mothers, and but I don't see the mothers and the grandmothers there saying, come here, child, you look tired. Let me hold your baby for a while. Let me teach you this. Let me teach you that. They don't have the nurturing that they needed, so they aren't able to nurture their children. But then they come at you in such sometimes very angry ways, because they don't have that connection. They don't have that loving feeling and connection. And so I think those things, that bonding, that nurturing, that all children are our responsibility. We love all and make sure all children are fed, safe, happy, and loved. Then that dialogue and listening to each other will naturally foster that kind of energy. And I know that's true because I've seen it happen, and we just need to reconnect with that. We're running out of time, and we're losing people because people are probably hungry and ready to go have something to eat. We will be coming back together for Indigenous People Forum and talking about traditions. So come back with us. And please go to Springlite or whatever. If you have comments or you want to reach out to any of us or things that you would like to input, we'd love to hear from you. But I think it's important that when we come back together, we come back also. We've given a lot of things about what could be fixed that are, and how we got to where we're going, and some solutions and things that we can leave here with and carry forward. So as we make these things a part of us, when we come back together, what are some of the traditional things that worked? What are some of the wisdom that we can share from our culture and our traditions that were healthy and wholesome, that can serve all people? Because we have to evolve together. We can't just evolve in little pockets. And so being a family, because Mother is diverse. If you look at all nature and all creation, it's such a diverse thing that she has created, just like her children. So I say in love to all of you, I love you all. Come back join us again and, bring your thoughts and ideas to us. And I'd love to hear from any of you that would love to, have some conversation or have something that you would like to teach me. I would love to hear from you, as with the other grandmothers. So thank you for being here. And we thank you, Mother, for the blessing of this time and this energy with these people that have come together to heal and to learn and to inform each other. Thank you for every breath in and every breath out, and for your abundance of love and gratitude. We say Yakoki.
Sinogama.